Continuing with the idea of how we notice numbers, we're now going to think about, if there is a politics to numbers, then we have to think about the social context in which numbers are deployed. So our next reading on the invisibility and hypervisibility of the black body is going to start talking to us about how numbers get used. And it's not that the numbers are wrong, but it is that the way the numbers are used is that they are not always clear on whether they are focusing on issues in a way that's actually equal. So certain types of inequality can get built into how we use the numbers. So in this reading, one thing we'll discover is that if you look at black body, in some areas it is hypervisible. It is hypervisible as criminal. It is hypervisible as sexual. It's hypervisible as dangerous. And we already know, for example, when we look at media and media representation, that there are consequences to these kinds of ideas, that if they are hypervisible, they create one type of bias. But there's also invisibility. In some areas, the black body is often invisible. Invisible as scientists, invisible as mentors, invisible as the people who are doing a tremendous amount of low-wage work and unpaid labor that is necessary to sustain our economies. Invisible in terms of the number of times in which they get denied health, face infant mortality, are forced to live in areas where there's ecological devastation and environmental racism. So you begin to see now that numbers are being attached to an existing field where some things are hypervisible and some things are invisible. Why this matters is that numbers don't just exist. Someone has to go out and collect them. Someone has to decide why these numbers matter, and someone has to decide how to use them in making a report and analysis. In other words, the politics of numbers is always attached to, this is the social science word, the politics of representation. You cannot separate the politics of numbers from the politics of representation when it comes to the use of numbers for representing human populations. Because that's what we're doing with statistics. We are representing a human population. So when I use numbers to measure something like stars or astronomy and so on, it's a different kind of representation. But in this case, it's a social science, which means that my politics of numbers is supposed to represent particular groups of people. That's what statistical analysis means. What is a first world country? What is a developing country? What is it that men do in the economy? What is that women do in the economy? What is the role of class in the economy? What is the role of migrants in the economy? All of this is data driven. And so we have to pay attention to both where the data is coming from, how it is used, and what assumptions we might be using. Again, this doesn't mean data is useless. It means data is crucial. So instead of running away from data, we are going to lean into this and learn how to use it correctly. Just as when we realize there's a politics of representation, we don't run away from it. We learn how it works, and we learn what to take from it. We learn what is believable. We learn what is not. We learn how to triangulate our sources and get information from multiple places in order to gather enough information to work through that. Same idea. Right? So the hypervisibility and invisibility of the black body is going to be a second piece of your pre-class post. So it's same 300, 500 word post. But now, remember, you've actually got two readings. And if you look at the pre-class post, it actually asks you to reflect on both these things of the politics of numbers. How we notice them. When do we hypervisibly notice them? When do we not notice them at all when we should? This is going to be the basis for everything that follows. Because as it turns out, the economics of gender is about addressing this set of issues. In many areas, women's labor, especially unpaid labor in the home, is invisible. So this is the invisibility of numbers. In some areas, there is a hypervisibility. In terms of fertility, for example, do you have too many babies? Do you not have enough babies? How are women affecting the environment by having children in the third world? So there is both invisibility and hypervisibility, and we're going to have to work through both of those as we work through this. We're also going to use the concept of intersectionality in terms of how in some areas, some issues are hypervisible. Same issues are quite invisible when it comes to another geographic region. So we're going to have to again rebalance our data to get at that. So before we finally finish this part of the class, let's learn a little bit more about numbers in the next video.